Hello and welcome to True Crime Sleep Stories. It's time for you to settle in, dim the lights, and get comfortable because tonight's tale is one that's as horrifying as it is haunting. But first, I've got some exciting news you won't want to miss. CrimeCon 2025 is right around the corner, and it's happening this September 5th through the 7th in Denver, Colorado. It's the ultimate true crime experience, and I would love to see you there. I've got an exclusive 10% discount code just for you. Use the code BRINK, B-R-I-N-K, at checkout to grab your tickets. And as a thank you for being such an amazing listener, if you stop by my table with your ticket or code receipt, I'll have a free signed copy of my book, True Crime Sleep Stories, waiting just for you. I can't wait to meet you face to face. And now we're diving into the dark and twisted story of Albert Fish, a man whose crimes defy comprehension. His chilling legacy is one that will likely stick with you long after this episode ends. It's a story you won't soon forget. And now, let's get started. In the shadowy corners of American crime, few figures evoke as much dread and bewilderment as Hamilton Howard Albert Fish. Born on May 19, 1870, Fish's life would unfold to paint a sinister tapestry of murder, cannibalism, and depravity that defies comprehension. Known by a plethora of chilling monikers, the Gray Man, the Werewolf of Wisteria, the Brooklyn Vampire, the Moon Maniac, and the Boogeyman, Fish's reign of terror spanned the mid-1920s, leaving an indelible mark on the nation. Fish's heinous acts included at least 3 confirmed child murders between July 1924 and June 1928. Yet his confessions alluded to a far more extensive and darker repertoire, hinting at a possible 100 victims. Arrested on December 13, 1934, Fish faced justice for the heinous kidnapping and murder of young Grace Budd. In what became a highly publicized trial, he was convicted and subsequently executed by electric chair on January 16, 1936, at the age of 65. Albert Fish's early years foreshadowed the chaos and malevolence that characterized his later life. Born in Washington, D.C. to Randall Fish, a man 43 years his mother's senior, and Ellen Frances Howell, Albert was the youngest of 4 children. The Fish family was deeply entangled with mental illness. His uncle and several siblings were plagued by various psychological disorders, a familial curse that seemed to extend to Fish himself. After his father's sudden death from a heart attack, young Albert Fish found himself thrust into the harsh environment of St. John's Orphanage, where he endured and disturbingly embraced frequent beatings. Freed from the orphanage's clutches by his mother in 1880, Fish's life took a darker turn in 1882, when at just 12 years old he began a relationship with a telegraph boy. This association introduced him to disturbing practices, including the consumption of human waste, setting Fish on a path of deviant behavior. He became a familiar face at public baths, fixated on watching other boys undress, a harbinger of the predatory tendencies that would later define his criminal career. Albert Fish's infamy was further fueled by his penchant for writing obscene letters to women, sourced from personal ads and matrimonial agencies. These letters, laced with lewdness and menace, provided a glimpse into the warped psyche of a man who thrived on fear and inflicted pain. As we explore the harrowing chapters of Albert Fish's life and crimes, we unravel the complexities of a man whose malevolence seemed boundless. In understanding Fish, we confront the chilling reality of human darkness at its most extreme. In the bustling heart of New York City around 1890, a young man named Albert Fish arrived, wide-eyed and eager to make his mark. At just 20 years old, the city offered Fish more than he could have imagined, a place where shadows lingered in every corner and secrets whispered through alleys. It was in this labyrinth of anonymity that Fish began a chilling chapter of his life, seeking out the vulnerable and indulging in dark desires that would haunt him for decades. Fish's early years in New York were marked by disturbing behavior. He engaged in male prostitution and preyed upon young boys, most under the tender age of 6, leaving a trail of trauma in his wake. By 1898, Fish's life took a seemingly normal turn when his mother arranged a marriage to Anna Mary Hoffman, 9 years his junior. Together, they had 6 children: Albert, Anna, Gertrude, Eugene, John, and Henry. Yet beneath this facade of domesticity lay Fish's compulsion for criminality. In 1903, he found himself behind bars at Sing Sing prison, convicted of grand larceny. For his children, life seemed ordinary until 1917, when the family unit shattered. Fish's wife abandoned him for another man, leaving Fish grappling with reality and the task of raising their children alone. Disturbingly, it was during this tumultuous time that his children noted Fish's penchant for bizarre games. One particularly chilling activity involved them paddling their father with a nail-studded paddle until blood flowed, a testament to Fish's twisted desires. His self-inflicted punishments grew increasingly grotesque, embedding needles into his flesh and setting wool aflame inside his body. After his wife's departure, Fish's correspondence with women revealed another layer of his depravity. He wrote letters detailing horrific sexual fantasies, though none of these women responded to his macabre proposals. With no partner to fulfill his desires, Fish traveled extensively, painting houses across various states. Some believe his choice of location was strategic, targeting areas with large African American populations, under the assumption that their disappearances would provoke less attention. In 1910, Fish's depravity reached new depths when he met Thomas Bedden in Delaware. Their relationship culminated in a horrific 2-week ordeal of torture. Fish's sadistic tendencies manifested into a nightmarish scene, culminating in the mutilation of Bedden's body, a memory Fish recounted with chilling detachment. What began as an unsettling alliance quickly spiraled into a nightmarish descent, shrouded in the murky waters of sadomasochism. The dynamics of their relationship were ambiguous at best, with Bedden's potential cognitive impairments casting shadows over the question of consent. After a brief 10-day period, Fish transported Bedden to an isolated farmhouse, a setting that would become the backdrop for 2 weeks of unimaginable torment. Fish's acts of cruelty escalated to a horrifying climax when he bound Bedden and severed half of his penis. The chilling memory of Bedden's screams and the haunting gaze he cast upon Fish was something the perpetrator would later recall vividly, a grim testament to the horror of that moment. Fish's original plan was even more macabre. He intended to end Bedden's life, dismember his body, and take the remains home as grotesque trophies. However, the oppressive heat of the season posed a risk for attracting unwanted attention, forcing Fish to abandon his grisly intentions. In a bizarre twist of care mixed with cruelty, Fish attempted a rudimentary treatment, pouring peroxide over the wound and wrapping it with a Vaseline-soaked handkerchief. He left Bedden with a $10 bill, a final twisted gesture of farewell before kissing him goodbye. Boarding the first train he could find, Fish fled the scene, never once looking back or seeking to discover Bedden's fate. The incident became another dark chapter in Fish's life. The unraveling of Fish's psyche continued as he experienced vivid auditory hallucinations and engaged in relentless self-harm. He wrapped himself in carpets and claimed to follow divine instructions. X-rays later revealed a grotesque collection of needles embedded within his body, physical evidence of the man's tormented mind. While his children bore witness to his peculiar behaviors, Fish never directed his violence towards them. Yet, he drew them into his world, encouraging their participation in his bizarre rituals. The boundaries between pain and pleasure blurred as Fish descended further into madness. Albert Fish's early adulthood paints the portrait of a man whose life was anything but ordinary. His story stands as a chilling tale of how deeply one can descend into darkness. In the shadowy alleys of Georgetown around 1919, Albert Fish's sinister proclivities began to surface with chilling intensity. His first known attack was on a vulnerable young boy with intellectual disabilities. Fish, guided by his twisted rationale, targeted those he deemed invisible to society, often selecting victims who were either mentally disabled or African American, believing that their disappearances would just go unnoticed. Fish's depravity knew no bounds. He sometimes paid boys to lure other children into his grasp, ensnaring his victims with promises that hid his gruesome intentions. Once captured, these innocent souls faced Fish's self-proclaimed implements of hell, including a meat cleaver, a butcher knife, and a small hand saw, tools of torture and death that became synonymous with his reign of terror. On the quiet afternoon of July 11, 1924, in Staten Island, 8-year-old Beatrice Keel was playing alone on her family's farm. Fish approached her with a cynical facade of kindness, offering money to help him search for rhubarb. Fortunately, Beatrice's mother sensed danger and intervened just in time, driving Fish away. Undeterred, Fish returned later that night, seeking refuge in their barn. It was here that Beatrice's father discovered him, forcing the intruder to flee once more. Fish's mental state continued to deteriorate. By 1924, at 54 years old and suffering from psychosis, he claimed divine voices commanded him to commit unspeakable acts of torture and mutilation against children. One day, while contemplating his next move, he sought out a 10-year-old boy he had previously molested, Cyril Quinn. Fish approached Cyril and his friend as they played boxball, offering them lunch. Once inside Fish's apartment, the young boys inadvertently uncovered his arsenal of horror hidden beneath the mattress. Terrified by the sight, they fled, unknowingly escaping a horrendous fate. Meanwhile, Fish's personal life mirrored the chaos within him. Despite already being married, he wed Estella Wilcox on February 6, 1930, in Waterloo, New York. This union swiftly disintegrated, ending in divorce after just 1 week. His behavior continued to spiral out of control, leading to a series of arrests, including one for sending an obscene letter to a woman responding to a Maid advertisement. These repeated brushes with the law eventually landed Fish in Bellevue Hospital for psychiatric observation, where experts attempted to understand the mind of this man who eluded moral and legal constraints. This period of Fish's life reveals a decade-long descent into darkness, marked by a profound disconnect from reality and a relentless pursuit of malevolent desires. The chilling events surrounding the murder of young Grace Budd began on a seemingly ordinary day in May 1928. Albert Fish was perusing the classifieds in the Sunday edition of the New York World. One advertisement caught his attention. A young man named Edward Budd was seeking employment in the countryside. Fish, then 58 years old, saw an opportunity not just for employment, but for something far more sinister. On May 28th, Fish visited the Budd family in Manhattan, posing as Frank Howard, a farmer from Farmingdale, New York. His story was convincing, and he promised to hire Edward and his friend, weaving a tale that would soon turn dark. Though Fish's initial plan involved Edward, it was the presence of Edward's younger sister, 10-year-old Grace, that shifted his malevolent intentions. Fish concocted a story about attending a niece's birthday party, persuading Delia Bridget Flanagan and Albert Francis Budd Sr., Grace's unsuspecting parents, to allow her to accompany him. Trustingly, they agreed and sent Grace into the clutches of a monster. Fish led her to a house he had selected in East Irvington, New York, Wisteria Cottage. It was there that the unimaginable occurred. In the isolation of that house, Fish carried out his horrific plans. He strangled Grace to death, then gruesomely dismembered her body. Over the following days, Fish engaged in acts of cannibalism, leaving behind a haunting legacy of horror and despair. The investigation into Grace's disappearance initially led to Charles Edward Pope, a superintendent who was wrongfully accused and spent over 3 months in jail before being found not guilty. The true perpetrator, Albert Fish, remained free for several more years. It wasn't until November 1934 that the truth began to unravel. An anonymous letter arrived at the Budd household, its contents revealing the disturbing narrative of Grace's fate. Grace's mother, unable to read, had her son decipher the letter, a brutal recounting of events penned by Fish himself. The letter began with an unsettling story about cannibalism during a famine in China, a tale meant to rationalize Fish's own dark cravings. The chilling confession detailed Fish's actions on the day he took Grace, his calculated deceit, and the appalling acts that followed.
My dear Mrs. Budd, in 1894, a friend of mine shipped as a deckhand on the steamer Tacoma, Captain John Davis. They sailed from San Francisco for Hong Kong, China. On arriving there, he and 2 others went ashore and got drunk. When they returned, the boat was gone. At that time, there was famine in China. Meat of any kind was from $1 to $3 a pound. So great was the suffering among the very poor that all children under 12 were sold for food in order to keep others from starving. A boy or girl under 14 was not safe in the street. You could go in any shop and ask for steak chops or stew meat. Part of the naked body of a boy or girl would be brought out and just what you wanted cut from it. John stayed sick there so long he acquired a taste for human flesh. On his return to NY, he stole 2 boys, one 7, one 11, took them to his home, stripped them naked, tied them in a closet, then burned everything they had on. Several times every day and night, he spanked them, tortured them, to make their meat good and tender. He told me so often how good human flesh was, I made up my mind to taste it. On Sunday, June the 3rd, 1928, I called on you. We had lunch. Grace sat in my lap and kissed me. I made up my mind to eat her. On the pretense of taking her to a party, you said yes, she could go. I took her to an empty house in Westchester I had already picked out. When we got there, I told her to remain outside. She picked wildflowers. I went upstairs and stripped all my clothes off. I knew if I did not, I would get her blood on them. When all was ready, I went to the window and called her. Then I hid in a closet until she was in the room. When she saw me all naked, she began to cry and tried to run down the stairs. I grabbed her and she said she would tell her mama. It took me 9 days to eat her entire body. She died a virgin.
The letter spun a tale involving Captain Davis and a famine in distant Hong Kong, a narrative that investigators struggled to substantiate. However, when it came to the grim details surrounding the murder of young Grace Budd, the letter's accuracy was unnervingly precise. The description of Grace's abduction and the subsequent events proved to align disturbingly well with the known facts of the case. Yet the ultimate horror lay in the unverified claim that Fish had resorted to cannibalism, consuming parts of the innocent child's body. This assertion, while never conclusively proven, cast a sinister shadow over an already horrific crime, leaving a lingering question that would forever unsettle the minds of those who dared to traverse the dark corridors of this chilling narrative. In New York City, a seemingly innocuous letter arrived that would unravel a chilling mystery. The envelope bore a unique hexagonal emblem embossed with the letters NYPCBA, the insignia of the New York Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association. What connected this stationery to a gruesome crime was a twist of fate. A janitor who once worked for the association casually mentioned to the police that he had taken some of the stationery home. However, he had left it behind at his previous lodging, a rooming house at 200 East 52nd Street, when he relocated. This small detail turned out to be a pivotal clue. The landlady of the rooming house recalled a tenant named Albert Fish, who had checked out just days earlier. She mentioned that Fish's son regularly sent him money, and Fish had instructed her to hold on to his check. Detective William King, the investigator leading the case, decided to stake out the rooming house. His patience was rewarded when Fish eventually returned. Without raising suspicion, Fish agreed to accompany King to the police headquarters for questioning. However, once there, Fish revealed a hidden razor blade, his intentions unclear, but clearly sinister. Detective King swiftly disarmed him, ensuring Fish would be brought to justice. In a shocking confession, Fish did not hesitate to admit to the murder of young Grace Budd. He revealed that his original plan was to kill her brother, Edward. It was a warm evening on July 14, 1924, when the peaceful community of Port Richmond, Staten Island, was shattered by the disappearance of young Frances McDonnell. The 9-year-old had been playing catch with friends, a simple pastime that soon turned into tragedy. When Frances failed to return home, alarm spread through the neighborhood, prompting a frantic search. The following day, the horror was unveiled. Frances's lifeless body was discovered hanging from a tree in a wooded area near his residence. He had been subjected to unspeakable violence, sexually assaulted, strangled with his own suspenders, and brutally mutilated. The autopsy revealed gruesome lacerations across his legs and abdomen, with his left hamstring nearly stripped bare of flesh. Initially, it seemed there was no clear suspect, but whispers of a shadowy figure emerged. Friends of Frances recounted seeing the boy playing with an elderly man sporting a gray mustache. One neighbor corroborated their account, having observed the duo walking into the nearby woods. Frances's mother, Anna, provided an eerie description of the stranger. She recalled seeing an old man with thick gray hair and a drooping gray mustache who had shuffled down the street, mumbling incoherently while gesturing oddly with his hands. It was a haunting description that gave rise to the moniker, the Gray Man. Despite the police's efforts, the case went cold until it was rekindled by the murder of Grace Budd. Eyewitnesses, including a local farmer, recognized Albert Fish as the strange figure seen on the day of Frances's disappearance. Though Fish initially denied involvement, he eventually confessed to the murder after his trial for Grace Budd's murder concluded. The New York Daily Mirror would later label Fish as the most vicious child slayer in criminal history. Fast forward to February 11, 1927, in Brooklyn, where the atmosphere was thick with mystery and fear. 3-year-old Billy Beaton and his older brother had been playing in their apartment hallway with 4-year-old Billy Gaffney. When the older brother briefly returned to their apartment, both younger boys vanished. Billy Beaton was later found on the roof, but there was no sign of Billy Gaffney. When questioned, Billy Beaton offered a chilling response.
The Boogeyman took him.
Initially, suspicion fell upon serial killer Peter Kuzanowski, but the case took a chilling turn when Joseph Meehan, a trolley motorman, identified Fish from a newspaper photo. Meehan vividly recalled an old man attempting to calm a distressed little boy on a trolley, believed to be Gaffney. The boy, missing his jacket and crying for his mother, was dragged off the vehicle by the man. Police discovered that Fish had been working as a house painter in Brooklyn, just a short distance from where Gaffney disappeared. Despite her grief, Elizabeth Gaffney, Billy's mother, confronted Fish in Sing Sing prison, yet Fish refused to divulge any details about her son's fate. However, Fish later composed a letter to his attorney describing in harrowing detail the grotesque acts he had committed against Billy. His words painted a macabre picture of brutality and cannibalism, acts that defy comprehension. This confession not only cemented Fish's legacy as an unrepentant monster, but also underscored the depths of his depravity.
I brought him to the Riker Avenue dumps. There is a house that stands alone, not far from where I took him. I took the G-boy there, stripped him naked and tied his hands and feet and gagged him with a piece of dirty rag I picked out of the dump. Then I burned his clothes, threw his shoes in the dump. Then I walked back and took trolley to 59th Street at 2 a.m. and walked home from there. Next day, about 2 p.m., I took tools, a good heavy cat of 9 tails, homemade, short handle, cut one of my belts in half, slit these half in 6 strips about 8 inches long. I whipped his bare behind till the blood ran from his legs. Then I cut him up. I came home with my meat. I had the front of his body I liked best. I put in onions, carrots, turnips, celery, salt and pepper. It was good. I ate every bit of the meat in about 4 days.
His heinous acts serve as a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the veneer of normalcy. The trial of Albert Fish, a man whose crimes were as chilling as they were complex, commenced on March 11, 1935, in the quiet town of White Plains, New York. Presiding over the courtroom was Judge Frederick P. Close, while the prosecution was led by the determined Westchester County Chief Assistant District Attorney Elbert F. Gallagher. Opposing them was Fish's defense attorney, James Dempsey, a former prosecutor with the added political clout of being a one-time mayor of Peekskill, New York. For 10 grueling days, the courtroom became a theater of horror and disbelief as the details of Fish's heinous crimes were meticulously laid bare. Defending himself with a plea of insanity, Fish claimed to hear divine voices commanding him to murder children. Dempsey portrayed Fish as a psychiatric phenomenon, citing a staggering array of sexually deviant behaviors, including sadism, masochism, and even cannibalism. Central to the defense's argument was the testimony of Dr. Frederick Wortham, a psychiatrist renowned for his focus on child development. Over 2 exhaustive days, Wortham dissected Fish's distorted psyche, framing his obsession with biblical sacrifices as both a twisted penance and a misguided quest for atonement. Through Wortham's narrative, Fish emerged as a man who interpreted religious communion as an excuse for cannibalism, a disturbing reflection of his warped reality. When asked about Fish's mental state, Wortham concluded concisely and powerfully, "He is insane." Yet, the prosecution countered with its own experts, challenging the notion of Fish's insanity. Manus Gregory, a former manager at Bellevue Hospital where Fish had been treated, argued that while Fish was undoubtedly abnormal, he was not insane by psychiatric standards. Further testimony from Charles Lambert and James Vavasour suggested that Fish's peculiar proclivities, shocking as they were, fell within the realm of common, albeit socially unacceptable, perversions. The defense also presented Mary Nichols, Fish's young stepdaughter, who recounted disturbing childhood games that hinted at Fish's deviant inclinations. However, despite the defense's efforts and the jurors' shared belief in Fish's insanity, the prevailing sentiment was one of justice, a justice demanding retribution. Thus, the jury returned a verdict of sanity and guilt, sealing Fish's fate with a sentence of death by electrocution. On January 16, 1936, Fish met his end in the electric chair at Sing Sing Prison. Remarkably composed, he aided the executioner in positioning the electrodes upon his body. When questioned about his impending fate, Fish simply stated,
"I don't even know why I'm here."
The execution was fraught with rumors, including tales of needles embedded in his body, causing a circuit malfunction, later debunked as mere legend. In the aftermath, Fish's attorney, James Dempsey, confronted a media frenzy, eager for a glimpse into the mind of one of history's most notorious criminals. Clutching Fish's final written statement, Dempsey refused to share its contents, describing it only as the most filthy string of obscenities he had ever encountered. The tale of Albert Fish concluded, yet the echoes of his horrific deeds continue to haunt history. In his wake, Fish left a grim legacy marked by the lives he shattered and the innocence he stole. His actions carved a dark path through the early 20th century. Albert Fish's shadow loomed heavily over the early 20th century, leaving a trail of victims, some known and others only speculated upon. In the tangled web of his macabre deeds, each victim and their grieving families warrant somber remembrance. His known victims, from 1924 to 1928, included at least 3 children: Francis McDonnell, Billy Gaffney, and Grace Budd. Despite Fish's denial of further murders, authorities suspected his involvement in numerous other unsolved cases. Detective William King harbored suspicions that Fish might be the elusive Brooklyn vampire, a predator who targeted the young and vulnerable around the New York City area. One such case involved Yetta Abramowitz, a 12-year-old girl who was strangled and brutally beaten atop a Bronx apartment building on May 14, 1927. Witnesses reported seeing a man resembling Fish attempting to lure young girls into alleyways on that same day. Then there was Mary Ellen O'Connor, a 16-year-old whose mutilated body was discovered near a property Fish had been painting in Far Rockaway, Queens, on February 15, 1932. Her murder remains a chilling mystery, potentially tied to Fish. Fish chillingly boasted of sexually assaulting over 100 boys, many of whom were marginalized due to race or disability, a grim testament to his belief that justice would bypass these victims. In one of his most horrifying claims, he alleged that he murdered a child in each of the 23 states where he resided. Among these potential victims were Emma Richardson, a 5-year-old whose life was cut short on October 3, 1926, Emil Ailing, a 4-year-old taken on July 13, 1930, Robin Jane Liu, a 6-year-old lost on May 3, 1931, and Benjamin Collings, who at 17 faced an untimely death on December 15, 1932. Few figures evoke as much horror and revulsion as Albert Fish. Often regarded as one of the most depraved serial killers of all time, Fish's heinous acts defy comprehension and challenge the very limits of human morality. While his severe mental illness is undeniable, many argue that justice was served with his execution, as his crimes left a scar on the collective conscience that can never be fully healed. Fish's story is a haunting illustration of the malevolence that can lie dormant within the human psyche, waiting to surface in the most terrifying ways. His confessions, both chilling and revolting, offer a glimpse into a mind twisted beyond repair, driven by urges that defy rational understanding. The suspected breadth of his crimes suggests an insatiable appetite for suffering, making him a specter whose legacy is one of unrelenting darkness. This narrative serves as a sobering reminder of the evil that can exist behind the guise of normalcy, prompting us to ponder the complexities of human nature and the depths of depravity to which it can sink. Fish's tale forces us to confront not only the lives irrevocably altered by his actions, but also our own understanding of justice and redemption. It's a chilling chronicle that compels us to reflect on the fragile boundary between sanity and madness, normality and monstrosity. And that's the unnerving story of Albert Fish, a man whose actions were beyond comprehension, beyond human. It's almost too much to believe, isn't it? A true monster hiding in plain sight, preying on the innocent. If you're like me, the chills from this tale might still be running down your spine. You might even find yourself laying awake tonight, replaying the horror we've just uncovered. And honestly, who could blame you? Before you turn out the lights now, take a moment to check those doors and windows. Double lock them. Look under your bed and look in your closet. It's a small comfort, but one we all deserve after a story like this. Thank you for listening and spending your evening with me. Sleep well if you can. Good night and stay safe out there.